Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Dr. Borko B. Djordjevic. We're going to be discussing his amazing book, Fragile Peace, available for purchase through Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, pretty much wherever books are sold. But people, if you want to gather everything that Dr. Djordjevic has in store, well, do yourself a favor and head directly to his personal site. And that's timelessbeauty.com. There you'll find more information on Dr. Djordjevic himself, more information on this fantastic book, as well as find information on 2 other books that he's also written. Now, of course, Fragile Peace is the anchor for today's interview, so that's really going to be the one that we discuss fully. But also check in Serbian Inferno, which is in part almost a continuation of Fragile Peace. And then also Hazards, Negligence, and Liability in Plastic Surgery. All 3 of which, as I mentioned, available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, timelessbeauty.com. Head on over there today and get lost in all of them. And before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out that Dr. Djordjevic was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best advertising firms in the business. And people, you already know if you follow us, of course, I'm talking about Quipper Prints. So for my writers out there listening in, listen to me and listen to me good. If you have gone through your process, you have spent countless hours, I'm talking some sleepless nights, putting in your work, putting in your dedication to create your masterpiece, and now you finally have completed it. You've gotten to the end of the road, and you see that now you're in a precarious position because, well, now you need help moving that masterpiece you just finished creating. Well, I'm going to give you some fantastic advice. Contact Quipper Prints. People, they're one of the best in the business to do it, and this is exactly what their fantastic team specializes in. So head on over to quipperprints.com today and gather all of the ways that they're going to help you do just that. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Dr. Djordjevic here on the line. Now, the moment you start to do research on his book, Fragile Peace, you're going to be greeted with a lot. I mean, this book is layered, people. It is nuanced, and there is a lot happening. And this is why you need to have it on your shelf. So not only is it a memoir, right? It's going to follow Dr. Djordjevic's life as he migrated to the U.S., the people that he's met along the way, the politicians, all of the influences that he has had. But it's also going to give an in-depth viewpoint of the Bosnian War in the early 90s. Now, for a lot of us, we have heard about the Bosnian War through history books. We may remember seeing certain things on TV from news reports, but this man has lived it. He has a much closer and in-depth viewpoint of it than most. And a lot of times we, from an outside perspective looking in, we know that the Bosnian War resulted in the deaths of over 100,000 people, and also additionally displaced over 2 million. It was a war that had catastrophic results. And this was something that, listen, really across the board, all wars, and this is just my viewpoint. Oftentimes when you look at the pros and cons, I can't help but to think that the cons drastically outweigh the pros when it comes to really any war. The things that are gained don't usually amount to a justification to the loss of life and the destruction of life in the environments that are affected. But listen, that's just my particular opinion. We're not going to go in depth with it because in this particular show, that's not what's called for. But you need to know that you're going to sit back, strap in, and receive a fantastic education and a wonderful journey that you're going to be really a front row viewer for. And at the end of the day, don't take my word for it. Take Dr. Djordjevic's. It's his book. He's written it. It's his life. He's lived it. He's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. So like I said, sit back and strap in. Dr. Djordjevic, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Benji, very much. I couldn't say it better than you did. You covered the scope of my book, and you covered the problems that comes out of that book. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate you being my co-host or co-talker with this book. Thank you.
Of course. Well, listen, Dr. Djordjevic, it is a true pleasure and absolute delight to have you as a guest. And listen, all I'm going to say is you started it, okay? Because you wrote this fantastic book and laid a wonderful roadmap for me to follow. So technically, you did it. I was just following your instruction, but it is a true pleasure and an absolute delight. And before we jump into the book, I do want to learn a little bit more about your background, but because this is a memoir, I'm sure the two are going to overlap to a certain degree, and that's totally fine. But let's jump right in. Dr. Djordjevic, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I am a native-born Serbian in former Yugoslavia at that time, and I'm sort of a hybrid. My mother was born in Akron, Ohio, and my dad was from Serbia. My mother came to Serbia at the age of 17 to visit her grandmother, and the war broke out. And on the way, by the time 1941, the bombardment of Belgrade, and my mother and my father ran towards the east part of the world instead to go to the west. My life, I always craved to go back to see my mother's land. Mm-hmm. And so in 1970, I landed in JFK, smelled the smell of the gasoline. That was very impressive. I flew with 10 a.m. directly from Belgrade at that time to New York. And obviously, I was a doctor, but I was able to transfer my doctor's knowledge into American licensing and residency, and eventually extended my training into plastic surgery. I achieved a notable career in plastic surgery in the 70s and 80s, and now I continue to work actively in Montenegro, Serbia, and Dubai. In my growth, as I was writing the book and I rekindling my way of living, I had a lot of dilemmas, a lot of decisions to make. I had to adapt to success and trauma of being away from my environment, and as a young man, creating American career in a very different environment. Also, as I eventually become successful, and I crossed my paths with some of the very famous and very substantially known people as a surgeon. My only thing that I could offer is my handiwork, and through years of working next to 30 years in Southern California, I was able to reach out and meet many people, senators, congressmen, and other stars. But along with it, I met about 5 presidents who basically love Palm Springs. They like to come to Ann Arbor, the state, and from President Eisenhower, which I didn't meet, but we had Nixon, we had Reagan. Reagan would like to spend a lot of time in New Year's Eve with his kitchen cabinet, was in Ann Arbor, thing. Then we had also we met Clinton, we met Obama, and of course I met Trump way many years before that, when Trump was in his Plaza Hotel, things like that. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, this was my brief looking. In my book, I have described some of this disintegration of a socialist federal republic of Yugoslavia, and quite a bit of interest of the big capital, big powerful people that basically were involved with me as a form of a contact group. Mm-hmm. The contact group was a 5 countries which basically were running the peace process, and obviously every one of them had their own agenda, but there was a pro-Western. Yugoslavia, as I know it, basically was a very, very successful, when I left in 1970, was very, very successful and very upbeat, interesting country. It was the third largest military power in Europe, believe it or not. It was made of 6 republics and 25 million people. And granted, it was a uniparty communist system, but it was well balanced economically and socially.
Yeah.
The Catholic, Muslim, and the Serbian Orthodox lived in a harmony and commingled through many, many marriages. Of course, Yugoslavia at that time was pretty much pro-Western. There was nothing left for any alliance with the Eastern Bloc. The guy that ran the Yugoslavia and formed the Yugoslavia as President Tito, who eventually ended up forming so-called non-aligned bloc with the 90 countries. So at one point in time, we had a NATO, we had the Warsaw Pact, and we had the non-aligned countries, which are very powerful and made a lot of decisions in the United Nations. And sort of it was kind of peaceful time, 70s and part of the 80s, except the Vietnam War and some other places. Of course, I was at that time, Tito was quite a guy because he loved, he met a bunch of presidents and he got a lot of money from the United States, which they were not refundable. He got about $50 billion because he shook off Russia, Stalin. Mm-hmm. So he, as they said, Churchill said at one point in time, they pointed out, you're listening, he says, you're supporting a communist dictator. Oh, that's okay. He is a communist, but he is our communist, said Churchill, when he was negotiating and giving Tito more power. Nevertheless, I grew up in a country that was pretty balanced, was pretty good. And so when I went to the United States, it was pure exploring, see what's happening there. Everybody wants to go see the United States. And I ended up visiting a hospital. I saw how they draw the blood with a vacuum. We used to bake the needles and we used to inject them and sterilize them through a fire and heat. I came to this New Jersey Orange Hospital, Orange Memorial, and I saw how they draw the blood by vacuum, which was 1970. God, I said, Jesus, this is the place to be. I want to learn more. I decide to stay. The rest of it is the history. I just lived it fully.
Thank you very much for all of that, Dr. Djordjevic. And people, listen, could we have selected a more perfect embodiment of a person of distinction to be on our network? I'm telling you, man, this guy is impressive. His books are even more so. You got to head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, timelessbeauty.com and pick them all up because I'm telling you, we've just scratched the surface, but you can already tell this is an adventure that you're going to be embarking upon. And when you stop and realize that all of this is true, I mean, these are not fabricated stories. This is not a play on hyperbole. This man's life has been so eventful, and you're going to be a passenger alongside all of it. You got to pick up your copies today. That's the only way to do so. Dr. Djordjevic, my next question here. I love the title of your book because, just the words themselves and the imagery that comes up really stops you in your track, but also it has such a direct connection to the narrative itself. So I want to go into inspiration in a 2-part question here. First and foremost, what inspired you to categorize or name your book Fragile Peace? And then what inspired you to write this particular book?
Well, about the 90s, I was pretty busy and times to get some clear head, what they say. I decided to travel back to Yugoslavia, 90s. I came 90s. It was a wonderful place. People are living very Western way. But by 1991, there was a commotion and there was a civil unrest started in Slovenia and moved to Croatia. they wanted to secede from the Yugoslavia, which is now talking like Slovenia is a small country. And next thing you know, by 1991, there was an instant conflict between the Muslim Catholics and the Serbian Orthodox. The neighbors were killing neighbors, mixed marriages were falling apart, and destruction of the country and human relations went out of the control. Something like we're seeing now in Gaza and the civil war soon spread to the rest of the countries. So Slovenia, Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro, Macedonia, all of them were in the middle of a civil. There was some kind of mayhem and some kind of war which lasted exactly 5 years. I, who was a plastic surgeon and who has in a peak of my career, wanted to do lecturing and do things. I was not able to do nothing. I just found myself completely cut off, and I wanted to go back, but it was feeling bad for my friends, which are some of the many closest friends and family members of mine were involved in this mayhem. And I couldn't stand quietly to watch the events.
Of course.
And so by 1992 and 1993, I was looking to help and stop the civil war, do something about it. And so I did. I ended up bringing President Carter in Sarajevo in 1994, and we created a cessation fire, which basically evolved in 1995 with a Dayton Accord into the full peace in the region. Now, I was single-handedly, I did that, and I had my friend, my friend attorney, Tom Hanley, who basically kept me out of trouble, not to take any side, but it was great to have him there. But I did basically, through my connections, through Mrs. Rosalind Carter and President Carter, I persuaded him to come and make some kind of efforts, which they were in a business doing that through the Carter Center. So at that time, as we were making all this thing, it was all looked pretty fragile to me, because they did that because of the forces of the outside powers. Also, they make a peace because they had some funds and money supply, so things come down. But it never really was a full peace, just like we're seeing in other places. So when I started writing the book and I was getting into this, I knew that this is not going to last forever. Yeah. So that's how I came with a fragile peace. Some of the events, in this book, I am not only a witness and a standby, I participated and I being part of the decision making. I was representing the guy named Radovan Karadžić, who basically was the president of Republika Srpska, who asked me to come. He's a medical doctor and psychiatrist. He found himself running the country, he never ran a country. He asked me to bring Kissinger or President Carter so they can intervene and do some kind of international settling down. But in that portion, he gave me, as you can see in the book, he gave me power or attorney to negotiate some of the vital subjects of the settling and peace settling with the territory and some of the other important financial dealings. So in fact, I was a part of the decision making, so I have a pretty clean insight of the events. And they're true and they're real, and it's almost like a documentary that I have put together there.
And what an operative term that you used in terms of it's almost like a documentary, because when I was thinking about this, when we were doing our research and preparation for today's interview, Dr. Djordjevic, I kept coming back to thinking this is something that needs to be on the screen, because everything that you talk about in the book, it's so gripping, right? This is something that, of course, listen, and in a literary form, it can move mountains in terms of the insight that it gives. But we know, listen, we currently live in a digital world, and people are moved by the graphics that they will see much, much more than the words that they'll read. So I think as a literary creation, it is fantastic. But really, if this were to be put on the screen, it would... I'm telling you, I can see this easily being on television screens or a film screen and being created that way.
I think Netflix would be happy to do it. I can tell you that I have a script which has been written by a producer who made many movies, and I have a copy of the script. They wanted to put it in a form of a movie. We never got to the point because I didn't agree with the actress that had to supposed to play me off. You would believe that. Charles Bronson was supposed to play Pierre Bronson was supposed to play my friend Tom Hanley, and I was supposed to be played by DeVito. What's the name of the actor? The little guy was
Danny DeVito.
And so we had and I refused to participate in the movie. Can you believe that? That was a crazy time. I should have, but there is a script there. And in that process, you have my friend got shot. We got shot. I flew with a little helicopter. We got shot over the Bosnian. I created a huge a base where I had gathered all the children to the World Health Organization. It says that in a book where we managed to collect all these poor children that got injured. They could not get the real medical help. We needed to transport them to a variety of centers, like children that lost their eye, children that had a brain injury or burns. All these people were taken care of, and that was my job, which I did, and obviously I participated in that. And there's lots of action, and it would make a good screenplay. Maybe Netflix might be interested in it. I don't know. We'll talk about maybe later on.
Absolutely.
I'm going to send you the script, and maybe through your time you can take a look, see what you think.
Absolutely. Listen, it would be a true pleasure, and I'm telling you, I would not be surprised. I think Hollywood is pretty tapped out with ideas, which is why we continue to see a regurgitation of the same old thing. This is something that, obviously, again, because it's all based upon true things, the story itself in moments is heartbreaking. So by no means am I saying that it's entertaining because of that, but it's entertaining because of the fact that this actually happened. It is gripping to see the world through your eyes, through your lens, and how you've depicted it. And I'm telling you, people, we have barely scratched the surface. You know, I could sit here and I could talk to Dr. Djordjevic for hours because I am at the edge of my seat, and I know so many of you are as well.
Yeah, well, we have a message. We have a message that shows up through the history, and its history repeats itself. Yeah. We have so much suffering, so much pain, so much, and the poor children suffer the most. We have a huge story about that, how we try to help. They became homeless. They became without a parents. So we are repeating that. Yeah. We have it all over, happening over and over. Why is that and how it is? And it's always a fragile. Whatever you make it, one area explodes in the other one. That's how I see it.
You know, and I think that brings up a bigger point in terms of what your book symbolizes. This is so much bigger than just the Bosnian War because people, as he stated, we see a lot of that happening again. Right? When we look at Israel and what is happening there.
Over and over.
When we look at a lot of the wars that America has been in. Like, people, this happens over and over. And as I started off by saying, I'm now ending by saying, my personal opinion, I'm not pushing it at anybody else, but when we look at war and we weigh the pros versus the cons of it, I look at it and I say the cons drastically outweigh the pros. And the amount of life that is lost, and the amount of people that have their lives, the ones that survive, their lives get completely turned upside down because they lose so much. It's not worth it, people. It is not worth it, and it's a heartbreaking fact. Listen, I I'm going to close out here because I know you all are already heading on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, timelessbeauty.com. You are in the process of purchasing copies of your book as we speak. Make sure to not only check out Fragile Peace, look into Serbian Inferno, as well as Hazards, Negligence, and Liability in Plastic Surgery, all of which were created by Dr. Borko B. Djordjevic. Head on over there, pick up all of those copies, get lost in them, and you can thank me later because I promise you, these are books you aren't going to be able to put down. Dr. Djordjevic, this has been a true pleasure, man, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you, Benji. Thank you so much.